Bobby Torres of Frightbox recording here to share with you my approach to mixing drum overheads within a metal production. First things first, I would like to shout out to Lexi Plexi for requesting this video. Thank you very much for giving me the idea, because I have long forgotten, because I've been doing this for so long, that this is something that I struggled with for a long time. And I struggled with this because I mainly do metal production, just like a lot of you guys. And when I went to school for audio production back in college, they, like most schools, taught us traditional overhead miking, traditional overhead processing, and it just doesn't work for the most part within modern day metal productions. But I'll get more into that later. I'm gonna play for you the sample, and then as soon as the sample is over with, I'm going to show you step by step exactly how I process my overheads and the approach I take to achieve the sound I've achieved within this video. So let's check it out. Okay, so the issue I used to have right off the bat, I'm gonna mention, is I would always try to get my kit sounding great in my overheads, right? So I would try to get my kit, cymbals, even the room sounding great in the overhead mics. And when it came time to mix, I'd always be fighting this battle of getting the snare to sound right in the overheads, but then when I would combine the snare mic with the snare in the overheads, it wouldn't work right. And then when I did get it to sound right, the drummer would ask me to turn up the China, and all of a sudden my balance was off, right? Maybe many of you can relate. This is a struggle that a lot of people go through, especially when you're listening to the more traditional guys, right? A lot of metal and hard rock guys actually approach cymbal processing the same way that I do, so this is by no means unique to me. So it's just not well known on the internet for whatever reason. People are still spouting the old school information, which again, if you're working with a doom metal band, or maybe you're in a doom metal band, or you're working with, I don't know, like punk rock or indie rock, completely different story. I'm talking about extreme metal where you want a crystal clear cymbal sound, right? The first thing I want to mention before I even explain the processing is you want to close mic your cymbals. Think of your cymbal mics as cymbal mics, not overheads. Okay, so I'm gonna stop yapping and I'm gonna go through the exact signal chain here. So if you look, here's my kick, snare, toms, right? Okay, so here are my cymbal mics. There is no processing on the channels at all, except I have an EQ on my hi-hat mic that's just pulling out a little bit of 2K. There's a little bit of harshness happening there. But the other channels have no EQ at all. That is because they are being routed to a cymbal submix group, and all of the processing is happening on the submix group. Now, the reason why I do this is I like to keep things as simple as possible. Obviously, all of the cymbals are being recorded in the same room. They are all sharing a similar, actually, yeah, I mic'd all of them with an SM81. The exact same microphone. They all share a similar frequency response. Okay, so the only time I'll actually go in and EQ them individually is if one of them has a problem frequency, kind of like this hi-hat. The rest of the cymbals didn't need that 2K pulled out, but the hi-hat did. That's why I did that one separately. With that being said, again, all of them are being routed to my cymbal submix group. So let's look at the processing that's actually taking place on the submix group itself. Okay, so one of my favorite plugins here, the Metric Halo Channel Strip. So the first thing I'm gonna point out is if you look here, my high pass is extreme. I'm rolling off pretty much everything below around 300 hertz. Again, traditionally, a lot of guys will tell you to, make your snare sound great in your overheads. Make sure to, you get a nice room sound in your overheads. I do not approach it like that. I use my cymbal mics as cymbal mics, they're not overheads. And I use a room mic to blend the kit together, which I'm going to get to right after I go through this signal chain. So outside of that, I just have some light compression. And this is the other key here. I do not overcompress my cymbal mics. The main reason for that is if you overcompress your cymbal mics, you are going to end up in trouble with your hi-hat. Hi-hats get into everything. They're extremely annoying and extremely bright. So when I mic my cymbals, I actually try to avoid the hi-hat as much as possible, mic the hi-hat, and then adjust the hi-hat accordingly. And I do not overcompress the overheads, because if I overcompress the overheads, that'll bring up the snare, kick, things you don't want within the overheads, along with the hi-hat, especially the hi-hat. Okay, so with that being said, that's actually all the processing that's happening on the cymbals. Just an extreme high passing up to like 300 hertz, right? Some light compression, and in this case, I have a low shelf. The reason why I'm doing that is there was a little too much snare happening in the overheads, and a lot of that snare was happening in like the 1K, 500 hertz-ish range, right? So I just have a low shelf here, just reducing those frequencies. Dead simple. High pass, low shelf, and the rest of the frequencies are untouched. So let's listen to the cymbals in isolation, completely raw, and then we're gonna listen to the cymbals with my processing engaged. So here they are raw. Let's check this out. So as you can hear, there's a little snare in there. The cymbals sound a little washy and kind of like boxy, right? So that is not going to work. If I were to just run these cymbals flat within the mix, they would clash with my close mics. So I'm just gonna engage my simple channel strip plugin with the EQ and the light compression. Again, the compression is doing very little. It's just there to soften some of the harder hits on the cymbals. But I do not overcompress because I do not want that hi-hat becoming too loud, and I do not want the rest of the room and everything else to become too loud. The room we're going to address in a couple seconds here. So let's listen to the cymbals with the processing engaged. Okay, so bypassed. And not bypassed. So as you can hear, that makes a massive difference. Now, obviously the cymbals sound extremely thin, but that's okay because we have our drums close mic'd, and we also had a room mic happening, and that's the magic here, is that you always want to have at least a mono room setup. In this case, I had a stereo, I had 2 room mics. Sometimes I do mono, sometimes I do stereo. It really depends on whatever mood I'm in that day at the studio. But the room mic glues the sound of the kit together for me. I know I'm not alone in this. A lot of metal producers approach cymbals and rooms in a similar way, where the cymbal mics are just cymbal mics and the room mics glue the kit together, as opposed to just 2 overheads that are supposed to magically capture the whole kit, which does work sometimes. I'm not gonna say that does not work, but for extreme metal, it is extremely rare in my experience. Okay, so I keep mentioning the room mic. Let's look at how I process my room mic. Luckily, it's even simpler than the cymbal mics. Let's listen to the room mic in solo. Okay, so nothing amazing. I use the room mic just to simply glue the sound of the kit together. Just gives the kit some realism and some overall glue, right? The only processing I have on my room mic is just a simple EQ. And if you look here, I just have a high pass happening at 100 Hertz and a low pass happening at 7K. I have a similar mindset with the room mic that I do with the cymbals. The room mic is not there to really capture much of the cymbals. It's there to add a sense of glue to the overall shells. So I want actually as little cymbal in my room mic as possible. Obviously that's hard to do, especially when the cymbals are really loud in the room. So the high pass is there to get rid of the unnecessary lows, and the low pass is there to get rid of the unnecessary highs. So for me, it's all about the mid-range with the room mics. And that's it. So let's add it all together and see how it sounds. So that is my overall approach to mixing cymbals. It's as simple as that. Now again, I'm just gonna mention, if I were working with a doom metal band or an indie band or something like that, I might take a completely different approach. I might base my whole drum sound off of the overheads themselves. I'm specifically talking about extreme modern metal, because this is an issue that a lot of people have. And again, I struggled with this for years because when I started, there wasn't a lot of information online. Actually, this particular topic, there's still not a lot of information out there online. So that's why I made this video. And Lexi, again, thank you for requesting this video. It's a great question and a great topic. Okay, so be sure to both like and follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Links are in the description. And don't forget to click the little bell icon in order to be notified every time I upload one of my weekly videos on all things metal and rock productions. And don't forget to download my free quick EQ guide. There is a link in the description. The guide contains all of my EQ settings that I always return to when I start a mix, so be sure to download it. Until next time, happy mixing.